down as the state records 35 new COVID cases. Meantime, Queensland records 4 new cases as more details emerge about a proposed quarantine facility. A man flown to hospital with severe injuries after a shark attack on the New South Wales mid-north coast. And the NRL deals over $300,000 in fines over a house party that breached COVID safety orders. Good evening, Girish Saulani with ABC News. 2 more residents at a Sydney aged care home have tested positive to coronavirus, taking the total to 5. The state government says it's still unsure if its lockdown will end this weekend. There are 35 new COVID cases. Around a third of them were in the community while infectious.
Special care to stop the spread. These remain anxious times at this aged care home at Baulkham Hills.
We're very saddened, of course, that we have 2 additional cases. I want to extend my best wishes to all of our residents that are currently in Westmead.
5 residents have now been infected and all have been moved to Westmead Hospital as a precaution. Both new cases are women in their 70s. One is fully vaccinated, the other is not because she moved into the home after the vaccinations were done.
I can only express my understanding to the families of people in that facility, but please, I'd like to assure them that there is a lot of attention to doing everything we can to prevent any further transmission.
There's attention too on the low levels of vaccinations among aged care workers after the virus was brought in by 2 staff members.
But up until 7 days ago, we were unable to insist our staff are vaccinated.
We asked the National Cabinet to give us advice on whether we could make it mandatory. National Cabinet has said mid-September is the deadline.
New South Wales says, though, the biggest issue is still supply.
We now have almost a sense now of the Hunger Games, of people chasing vaccine.
Overall, there are 35 new locally acquired cases. 33 are linked. 20 are in fact household contacts of previous cases. The source of 2 cases is unknown, and 11 cases were out in the community while infectious. Of the new cases, 1 is a student at Rose Bay Public School.
We're not exactly sure about the full infectious period, but that person may have been infectious at school.
At this stage, students are still scheduled to return to classes next week, although likely under stricter rules.
As a general sense, some of the things that we have looked at are things that we've had in place earlier. You know, we try and minimise parents coming to drop off the schools. We try and prevent parent functions and gatherings.
While everything might still feel like it's up in the air, the Premier insists the lockdown is working. But it's unclear just how effective it's been and whether 2 weeks is enough.
I know everybody is keen to know what's going to happen beyond Friday's lockdown, as am I.
She's waiting for the health advice that won't be finalised until later this week. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Queensland, meanwhile, has recorded 4 new community cases, all linked to existing outbreaks. It comes as more details are revealed about a new quarantine facility proposal near Brisbane Airport.
The history of puzzling COVID-19 cases has become clearer overnight as life returns to a pandemic normal.
We're feeling pretty good at where we are at the moment.
7 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed, 4 of them local transmission, but the Chief Health Officer isn't worried.
All closely linked, and we can work through all those, and we'll be putting out any additional venues.
One, announced late yesterday, is a close contact of a case at the Greek Community Centre. Her child has also now tested positive. The other 2 new cases are the colleague and partner of the man who travelled to Yamundi.
All of these are the Alpha strain. We do not believe that the Delta variant is circulating in our community, which is excellent news.
So too is that contact tracers may have found a missing link between 3 previous cases. It turns out they'd all been to the Zeus Street Greek Kitchen at Westfield Chermside at the same time.
We're just working out all of the specifics, but we think that is probably the site of transmission.
The Southeast Alpha variant cluster now stands at more than 20 and can be traced back to a leak from hotel quarantine. The Premier says the state could do away with using hotels altogether if the Commonwealth would commit to 2 standalone quarantine sites. The two governments are working through a new proposal at Pinkenba near the Brisbane airport. But Anastasia Palaszczuk is also pushing a private proposal at Wellcamp near Toowoomba, which fails to meet key federal government criteria.
Why don't you just give up on Wellcamp?
Because it's fully costed, it's ready to go, it could be built in 2 months.
No, that's not deemed a suitable facility at Toowoomba.
We believe the Damascus site is a far superior approach than Wellcamp.
The Pinkenba facility could hold up to 1,450 people, with 800 people arriving per fortnight in the initial stages.
Which would allow roughly 2 repatriation flights, 2 Australian government repatriation flights a week to bring home those stranded Aussies.
But before the idea takes flight, there's weeks of detailed planning and squabbling ahead. Kate McKenna, ABC News, Brisbane.
Western Australia has recorded no new local cases of COVID-19 linked to a northern suburbs cluster, giving authorities confidence restrictions can once again ease at midnight. Some measures, though, will remain in place for the rest of the week until the threat of further spread has passed. It comes as a crew member evacuated from a bulk carrier heading towards Fremantle tested positive.
The crew member was flown to hospital in Perth. He'd recently been in Indonesia and tested positive for COVID-19 after the bulk carrier made an emergency stop in Geraldton.
While this is less than ideal, we want to reinforce there is no current health risk to the Geraldton community. All other crew members are reported as being well.
The ship will anchor in Gage Roads off Fremantle, but the state is urging the federal government to order the carrier out of Australian waters. Meanwhile, no new local cases of COVID-19 were linked to what's known as the Bondi-Mindarie cluster of 6, and all close contacts have now been cleared. It means Perth and Peel restrictions will ease. From midnight, pubs and clubs will have a 150-person limit and the 2 square metre rule, with standing service allowed. Inside the home, 30 people are allowed, with 150 at private outdoor gatherings. Masks will still be mandatory indoors, but outdoors the rule will be relaxed. No masks unless you can't physically distance.
For people in the community, even if you've already been tested once, don't hesitate to get tested again, especially if your symptoms worsen.
Indoor and outdoor gym classes will be allowed to resume, and people who have left the city will be allowed to visit regional bars and restaurants from Tuesday, but will still need to wear a mask. The state government is now working on a compensation package for small business impacted by the lockdown, but says it will wait to confirm details until later this week, when it's more confident WA is in the clear of any further spread of COVID-19. A little relief for business hit hard by lockdowns.
By the end of the week, our sales were down, and when I was actually throwing out flowers, then I started to become a bit depressed about it and wondered about what would happen in the future and what is happening to small businesses like this and whether we'll be able to survive.
All restrictions are due to lift at midnight on Sunday. Eliza Lachon, ABC News.
Hundreds of GPs have begun administering the Pfizer vaccine as the government tries to ramp up the lagging rollout. Just over 500 general practice clinics around the country are now offering the Pfizer vaccine. Before today, most could only give AstraZeneca, which is not recommended to people under 60.
It means that we're actually getting to vaccinate more and more people in the different age groups. I mean, we're still running AstraZeneca and we'll be running Pfizer as well.
A further 800 GP clinics will come on board over the next few weeks, and the number is expected to continue rising. The government is planning to receive the bulk of Australia's Pfizer supply in October. Some 300 community pharmacies will be handling the rollout in remote and regional areas where there is no access to GPs. A man has suffered severe injuries after a shark attack on the New South Wales mid-north coast. The attack happened at Crescent Head around 4:30 this afternoon. Police say the man is believed to be in his 20s and was surfing when he was attacked by the shark. He was helped from the water and has been treated for serious injuries to his arm. Paramedics say he's in a serious but stable condition.
When we arrived, we had a young gentleman who was being attended to by bystanders, including guys from the surf club. I believe there was a couple of doctors with trauma experience here as well who applied immediate first aid using a makeshift tourniquet. Our paramedics treated him along with the assistance of bystanders prior to the Westpac helicopter arriving, and then was then transported to the helicopter before being flown on to John Hunter Hospital.
Former inspectors from Victoria's gaming regulator have told the ABC's Four Corners program they were prevented from investigating money laundering at Crown Casino. 5 former inspectors say the regulator knew that crimes were being committed and that their attempts to expose them were undermined.
Preventing criminal infiltration of Crown's Melbourne casino is a key responsibility of the state's gaming regulator. But 5 former inspectors have told Four Corners how they were prevented from carrying out this most important task.
A lot of the things that we would report up the chain of any sort of criminal activity just disappeared into oblivion. We never heard of anything further about it.
Peter McCormack is a former senior inspector with the Victorian Commission for Gambling and Liquor Regulation.
I felt that Crown were running our office. When they wanted things changed, things got changed.
Money laundering at Crown has been repeatedly exposed by the media rather than the regulator.
Money laundering has been going on at the casino for many years, and the regulator has known about it for a long time.
As scandals emerged, Danny Lacassis was part of the dedicated team that was supposed to monitor money laundering at the casino.
We were never encouraged to look into money laundering. If anything, we came across it ourselves. We'd put it up to our manager, and our manager had put up many times to senior management, but it fell on deaf ears.
The Victorian Royal Commission, due to report in October, has heard more allegations of money laundering. Its terms of reference do not include a direction to examine the failings of the state-based regulator.
The Victorian gambling regulator has been a lapdog, not a watchdog.
No one from the VCGLR, the Andrews government or Crown were available for interview. The former inspectors hope that by speaking out, it will lead to a regulator that Crown fears. Steve Kinane, ABC News.
Every year, Australians spend more on superannuation fees than they do on electricity. The government has been introducing reforms to help bring down fees and charges, but workers are being warned they are often paying too much.
Like many young Australians, Molly Kane hasn't paid much attention to her superannuation. She's had several casual jobs and 5 super accounts.
Knowing that the money that's meant to be going towards your retirement is now non-existent because of fees that you didn't know existed, it's really sucked.
Australians spend more than $30 billion in superannuation fees every year. That's more than what we spend on electricity bills.
Unfortunately, at the moment, people are being charged really high fees for pretty poor outcomes in some accounts.
If you've got $100,000 in just one superannuation fund and the fee is 1%, that's not a one-off $1,000 payment. As your account balance grows, so do your fees. After 10 years, assuming your balance has increased to over $200,000, you'll have paid more than $17,000 in fees. For higher returns, the performance of the super fund also matters.
Over the last year, super funds are now sitting on average returns of almost 20%.
The government's latest laws allow Australians to compare the performance of some superannuation funds. Its next step will be collecting data that allows people to compare fees and performance across all superannuation funds.
Superannuation funds have been put on notice that underperforming funds are not welcome in the system and that high fees can no longer be hidden.
Molly has now consolidated all her super accounts into one low-fee fund.
Look at your account. Are you losing anything in fees? Is your money growing? Is it shrinking? Don't be afraid to change super accounts.
More Australians like Molly are taking control of their money as competition in the super industry ramps up. Nasim Kadem, ABC News.
As debate over AstraZeneca rages in Australia, the Chinese-made vaccine Sinovac has Indonesian authorities reassessing their strategy. The government has used that vaccine to immunise more than 1 million Indonesian health workers. But a growing number of them are falling ill and dying from the disease.
Ganang Aditama's wife died from COVID-19 2 weeks after giving birth to their first child. The intensive care nurse worked at a hospital overwhelmed with the virus, though she'd already had 2 doses of China's Sinovac vaccine.
All health workers here are struggling with COVID. Maybe she died from being exposed too much.
The young nurse was one of millions of Indonesians vaccinated with Sinovac, but a growing number of health workers are dying even after full vaccination. Over the past 5 months, nearly 90 doctors have died. 20 of those had received both shots. It's raised concerns about Sinovac's efficacy over the longer term.
We're wondering if we need a third booster. Experts are investigating.
Though hundreds of fully vaccinated health workers who've fallen ill with the Delta variant have recovered.
Sinovac would have been enough, but this mutation is causing the efficacy to be decreased.
Indonesia is not the only country grappling with the Sinovac vaccine. Trials around the world had already shown mixed results and little about its impact on older people. Chile has relied on Sinovac to vaccinate almost 2/3 of its population, but like Indonesia, it's struggling with a surge in new cases and deaths.
Of all the vaccines currently available, we know less about Sinovac than any other vaccine.
Professor Toole says with a growing number of Australians opting for Pfizer, the unwanted AstraZeneca doses here could number in the tens of millions. Doses which could prove a life-saving backup for health workers in Indonesia.
We're producing 1 million doses a week in Melbourne of AstraZeneca, and the uptake is just going to fall.
Barely 5% of Indonesians so far are fully vaccinated. Anne Barker, ABC News.
The death toll from a military plane crash in the Philippines yesterday has risen to 47. The C-130 aircraft was carrying military personnel and crew when it missed the runway at an airport in Sulu province. All passengers have been accounted for after rescuers searched the burning wreckage for survivors. 53 people are undergoing medical treatment, including several troops who jumped before the plane crashed. An official investigation is yet to begin. Well, demolition crews have brought down what was left of a collapsed residential building in Florida ahead of an approaching tropical storm. After a number of explosions, the building began to fall, sending up huge clouds of dust and debris. The building collapsed on itself, with crews detonating explosives placed throughout the lobby and the basement. Search efforts paused for the demolition, but rescuers are hoping they'll now have access to the garage, which could possibly harbour survivors. A crowd had gathered to witness the event, some with candles for those still missing in the rubble. So far, 24 bodies have been recovered and more than 120 people are still missing. Well, the National Film and Sound Archive in Canberra has been gifted a rare glimpse into the younger years of Australian acting and dance legend David Gulpilil. This NIDOC week, the NFSA is releasing the footage from over 40 years ago for all to see. And a warning, this report contains images of Aboriginal people who may have died.
For decades, this Super 8 film was forgotten, languishing in a backyard shed in Townsville. It wasn't until Gavin Gilman decided to digitise his home movies of his time in Hawaii more than 40 years ago that he stumbled upon the visual treasure.
It just seemed to me that maybe more people than just our family would be interested in having a look at that.
The 6-minute recording shows a young David Gulpilil performing a traditional dance at an Australia Day celebration in Honolulu in 1979. A glimpse of the actor, dancer, painter and storyteller before he was truly famous.
This footage is really rare. We don't have anything else like it.
It's sort of from a pretty early point in Gulpil's career. It was 1979, so it was 3 years after he would have done Storm Boy.
Mainly because in latter years you saw Gulpil go on to do fairly tremendous things, and then we realised, hey, you know, way back there 40 years ago we saw this guy when he was probably just still developing his art, and we thought that it might fill a niche.
Now, just in time for NAIDOC Week, the footage has been donated to the National Film and Sound Archive for all to see and enjoy.
A home movie or something like this is a way of seeing another side of a person who's extremely significant. David Gulpil is such a legend, and so it's really important. It forms part of Australia's collective memory.
A time capsule of the past, as well as a poignant reminder of the enduring nature of Aboriginal culture. Madeline Austin, ABC News, Canberra.
New South Wales Police and the NRL have handed out their punishments to a group of St George Illawarra players who flouted COVID restrictions to go to a party and lied about it. The players have been fined more than $300,000 and they've been slammed by the club chiefs and the New South Wales Premier.
The Dragons are in damage control. 13 players have been fined a total of $305,000 for their blatant COVID breach. The host of the illegal gathering in Shell Harbour, Paul Vaughan, has copped a $50,000 fine and been banned for 8 games. Jack de Bellin's also been caught out after telling police he wasn't involved.
When you hear of parties going on in the middle of a lockdown, you've got to say, what is the thinking of some of these people?
The 30-year-old's been back in the game for a month after a 3-year suspension for rape charges. He was found not guilty of one charge and the others were dropped. The NRL says when police arrived at the house, players hid and fled on foot.
It's disappointing when anybody does the wrong thing. It doesn't matter what your profession is. It's just disappointing because every time somebody knowingly, and I say knowingly, does the wrong thing, it jeopardises all the rest of us.
The Dragons' origin stars Tarek Sims and Ben Hunt have been cleared.
Cool, yeah. It's good to see. I think him and Ben Hunt sort of shows, I suppose, all the Dragons teammates can learn from those players that have been at the origin.
There's little sympathy from the playing group.
You just do it at your own risk, and obviously we're caught, so you just got to wear the punishment, and it is what it is. But, you know, there's no judgment from me. It's just, if you do the crime, you got to do the time.
The NRL's harsh penalties aim to make an example of the players involved. Due to their past indiscretions, Jack de Bellin's been fined $42,000 and Corey Norman $50,000. All players that visited the house will be suspended for 1 game. With a bye this weekend, the Red V have a fortnight to decide who will take the field. Chloe Hart, ABC News, Sydney.
And the AFL has revealed its COVID-19 altered fixture for round 17 and Monday Night Football is coming back. The round kicks off with Port Adelaide hosting Melbourne at Adelaide Oval on Thursday. Hawthorn and Fremantle will travel to Launceston for their match on Saturday. The Lions will likely host St Kilda on Saturday night, but that is yet to be confirmed. And it's a similar story for GWS, who will face the Suns after midday on Sunday, but a stadium is yet to be locked in. 60,000 fans may swarm into Perth Stadium for West Coast's clash with North Melbourne. With just 18 days before the opening ceremony, Australia has finalised its team of 472 athletes for the Tokyo Olympics. The team is made up of more women than men and includes the highest ever number of Indigenous athletes.
It's been a long time coming, but the moment has finally arrived for Australia's Tokyo Olympians.
I'm enormously proud of this team. It's been challenging for every athlete.
The 472-strong team is the second largest to leave Australian shores, behind the 482 that went to Athens. There are 254 women, the most ever in an overseas Australian Olympic team, and 218 men. 16 team members are Indigenous, again a record number.
Oh, that's the point of the match.
The highest profile of them is Ash Barty, still in the running to win her first Wimbledon title. The youngest Olympian is swimmer Molly O'Callaghan, who's just 17.
Will she hang on? She will. It's a world record.
She's part of the swimming team, which is expected to bring home Australia's biggest haul of medals and includes upcoming stars like Ariane Titmus and Kaylee McEwen. But the AOC won't be making any prediction of how many medals the team will win.
The AOC did walk away from that after Rio. The feedback from the Athletes Commission was that it just wasn't helpful. Athletes put enough pressure on themselves without having us put more pressure on them.
And that's on top of the ever-present threat of COVID.
We're not being complacent about the possibility that there may be COVID-19 circulating in the village.
It means athletes won't be eating in communal areas like the dining hall in the Olympic Village.
The AOC says about 98% of Australian athletes will be vaccinated at the Games, while the overall number of all athletes and officials amongst all countries will be about 84%. That may be some comfort for Tokyo residents as COVID numbers there continue to rise. David Mark, ABC News.
Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor has taken the biggest victory of his professional career, winning stage 9 of the Tour de France by more than 5 minutes. The WA cyclist launched a solo attack on the 145-kilometre journey that included 2 grueling climbs in the French Alps. The 25-year-old won a stage of the Giro d'Italia last year, but this is his greatest triumph.
Brilliant, Ben. An ovation for O'Connor.
It's mind-blowing. It's what you dream of. It's so fulfilling and there's so much joy, and I've managed to control myself now compared to when I crossed the line.
The win moved O'Connor into second spot in the overall standings. It's been a day to savour for Australian golfers, with Cameron Davis and Lucas Herbert both winning titles. Davis forced a 3-man playoff in Detroit with a spectacular final round 67 before sealing his first US PGA Tour victory and a $1.7 million payday.
I've been in some good positions before, but to play the golf that I played coming down the stretch was just awesome.
Earlier, fellow Aussie Lucas Herbert won the second title of his career with a 3-stroke victory at the Irish Open. And there was cause for celebration on the Women's Tour as well over the weekend, with Steph Kyriakou's winning performance on the European Tour in the Netherlands.
We've got a lot of wet weather on the way this week for Western Australia. This is due to a series of low-pressure systems and fronts spiralling around them. That's going to bring some widespread showers and possible thunderstorms about the west coast, parts of the south coast as well as we move through Tuesday. Even the potential we could see some localised moderate falls about the coastal fringe. But these are going to continue pretty much all the way through until and including Sunday next at the end of the week. A high-pressure system is the dominant feature elsewhere, though, so it's keeping any fronts at bay. It is also leading to widespread frost over the southeastern inland, up into central Australia, also up into southern and central parts of Queensland.
And that is the latest from ABC News. 7:30 is up next, and I'll be back straight after with The World. I'm Girish Saldani. Have a good night.
Report the facts.